So I figured this would be, just like a very few people. So I kind of intended for this to basically be a little bit of a, back and forth thing. So tell me, like, what are some of the things you're looking for? Like, are you looking for things that I've as I've taught these that I've just sort of encountered, or things that, on a higher level, or uh, what are you what are your what's your goal to learn with this?
Just to hear how would you present that to students?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So starting with the Nardini, um, I think one of the things that I think is always challenging. Well, what's challenging with something like this is you're not actually hearing a student do it. So of course that makes it a little bit harder. But another thing that I always find when I'm preparing students for a competition is like choosing between what is probably good for them in the long run, but might get them a lower grade in the short term. And the biggest thing with that is like what fingerings to use. So the copy that they request is the Gingle, the international edition with the Gingle fingerings, which I think are really fantastic for this piece, but it's a lot of shifting around. It's a lot of going, up and down one string and stuff like that. So that does make it a little bit harder. But in the end, I do think it's a lot more rewarding if you can get them to do it. So it's going to require a very relaxed left hand for the student to be able to get around with that kind of fingering. So if they haven't done like some shifting stuff, which is not really all that interesting, but if they haven't done that, this might be a little bit of a challenge. And one of the ways that I try to get students warmed up with that kind of thing is just even like finger tapping, going up and down the fingerboard, doing that with different fingers.
Mhm.
Having like, up and down, just like, so they're just moving up and down with this. I also have them sometimes take the thumb away, do that, and then gradually sew it down to the in between two notes, and then putting the thumb back. So those are some things that I think are a little bit, like, just on a technical level, challenging about this particular piece. I find it interesting. So I got a rubric of like how they score things. So for the solo piece for this audition, there's only 3 categories. There's intonation, tone, and musicianship. So I think another thing that often students get a little tied up about is, are they following the directions, meaning like all the right bowings and the right, articulations and stuff like that, as opposed to just owning the piece. So like this edition also has like a lot of articulations. There's a ton of lines, there's a ton of accents, stuff like that. And it can get a little overwhelming if a student sort of sees those as sort of all rules to follow, as opposed to just what is the character of that. So another thing that I might do, just even to kind of prep them, is to do like, say, just even like just an E minor scale with different characters. Or, and if they're younger, I sometimes have them like write down different characters on a piece of paper, and and then they have to play, like if they write 3 different ones, like whether it's angry, soulful, ecstatic, something like that, and then they have to play them, and I have to try and guess. And that's something that I think helps them sort of own the music a little bit more, because what I found really interesting with this piece, I've taught this once. I never really studied it, but I did look at it just for this presentation. So like what I find really interesting about this Nardini, unlike the Haydn, which is for the high school students, is that this, to me, for this piece to really work, it requires mentally going off the page a little bit. So, like just even the tempo you have. So depending on like what kind of student you have, so I tend to, I mean, this is horribly generalized, but I tend to think of either like head students or heart students. So I have some students that really kind of prefer to just go through bow speed exercises and bow weight exercises and apply that to this. I have other students that prefer to like tell a story about what they're doing and then figure out how to get that. So if you have a more head student, you might, for example, talk about like, you know, what all these lines and accents, like how do you want them to sound? How do you, like why did he write all these lines? And this is clearly an edit, but like, why did he do that? Like, what does an accent mean? What does all that mean? And then just how do you go about getting it? So one of the big things that I deal with in terms of just trying to get a variety of sounds is making sure the hand is always flexible with bow weight. And a lot of that is really having the hand shift. So one of the things that I like to have students do, because they can really see this, is have them put the bow up like this and do that. And this, of course, requires like a ton more energy on the index finger, and then have them do that at the balance point, which is, you know, fairly equal. And then have them do that down here. We have to do a lot more of the pinky. And then once they've done that, I have them just actually lift the fingers that are not having that weight. So for example, you would have them start with an A string with the index finger up, and lifting each one of these fingers as you go down. Sorry, I'm moving the screen. And then the opposite way. And then having that without the fingers actually lifting. So that if you're going for a full sound, you know there's always going to be a little bit more weight on this finger towards this end of the bow. And then after you get to like the berry frog, it's going to go away from that. So when you have like this opening, you know that like a lot of it has to be the flexibility within the hand for that to work. The other thing that I always take students through right away is sort of that same idea, but a basic down up feel. So I'm very big on like when you have short notes, like for example, the two short notes right after the dotted quarter, that those have a feeling of down bows going this way, up bows this way, boom, boom. So they really pronounce out. Those are basic exercises I tend to take all my students through, like usually fairly early, pretty early on. Again, like what excites them about this piece, I think depends on the student. So if a student is more heady, I'll take them through basically all that. If they're a little bit more like heart oriented, then I tend to have them, like I said, tell me what this piece is about to you. Like, what is it about to you? What does it mean? You know, what's going on? And that sometimes also helps. I can play through it if you like, you know, and I can talk about like more really specific things, but
Sure, why not?
okay, all right. So
Playing is beautiful. Thank you.
oh, thank you. So like I said, this is one of the things that like I've really noticed this is again that just taking time like in certain places, and even though I've worked out bowings, I sometimes follow them, sometimes I don't. So like, you know, if you're sort of in the moment and something feels like you just want to take another bow, like I think just do it personally. But here's the first page. So.
Bravo, thank you.
Okay, sure. Tell me what you would like. I'm happy to go over some like exercises that I do to kind of like.
Well, honestly, it's a hard piece for middle school.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, to me, the hardest thing about this is making it work musically.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we have pretty good students, but in general, especially after pandemic, you know, from last year.
Yeah.
So, you know, the kids didn't get good instructions in general, you know.
Right.
And we have a pretty good, strong, you know, string program in Randall.
Okay, so like, so you can talk about things a little more detailed.
Well, the concerto itself, I feel like it's a little bit hard for middle school level. But playable, let's say. I don't know if they can get to that level as you played, but
okay. So like, what do you feel are some of the challenges your students might have? Like, what do you
challenges? Playing smooth.
Uh-huh.
A lot of high positions probably would be difficult. Like again, depends of the student, of course, you know. So yeah, but we're gonna try our best. We'll see.
Yeah.
So hopefully.
I do find that this exercise is something that really comes in useful.
Yes, I always do that. Yep.
Yeah, and another thing that I do, which is like a total delay thing, if I can find it. There's a bow speed exercise that I do that they also like because they can see it really clearly. And what I do is I just put the metronome on 60, and I have them divide the bow into three, like, so one bow on 3 clicks. And on the first click, they do the fastest bow speed possible, and the second and third, the slowest, and they alternate. So something like this. And then I do the same thing, like with slow, fast, slow. And kids actually really get into that. They like that because they can really see like what they're doing. A harder one is the bow weight, which I also do like with just 2 clicks. So I try to have like the first click with the most amount of weight and the second click with the least. And the bow speed never changes, so it's always in the middle. That one's a little harder because you can't see it as easily, but you can hear it. And then finally, I have them just do like sounding point things, like just the D scale of the fingerboard, and then the D scale like here, and a D scale more here. And those are things that I feel like a lot of students can grasp pretty quickly. The one where they tend to get a little glazed over is when you do shifting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just the relaxed hand with the shifting. That's
right.
That's, you know, that's usually when you start losing them a little bit, but you know, you have to. I mean, you have to with something like this. But I think, like I said, I think what I found interesting about this piece is that you kind of need to sap it up a little bit. I mean, to me, this piece, unlike the Haydn, like the Haydn for the high school one. Yeah. That works. That's like a lot. You have to do a lot less with it. You just have to play it beautifully, basically. Right. Whereas this one, if you really have good kids, you know, then it's really more about just overplaying your emotions a little bit and like figuring out how you're transitioning from mood to mood. So like when I get a really, really good kid, to me, like the really exciting stuff musically is when you're talking about how to transition from mood to mood. So like one of the things that like I for example, like even like in the second page, like the 1, 2, 3, 4th line down, like I felt like that forte didn't really work. So I just took it out. I mean, like, and that's always a, you know, I know a lot of students always say, well, are they going to mark me down for that? But I mean, I don't know if you've ever judged these before, but I mean, you're just listening to hours and hours and hours. I know, you're getting sick. Yes, so I did. Like anything that's solid and interesting, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's right away gets your attention. Yes. And also like just a good tone, you know, like a really good tone, because they get nervous and then their arm stiffens up and you know, so like good tone and just saying something like that. That will pick up the judges, you know, more than anything. But like I said, when I get a really good kid, then I really start to think about how to like connect one idea from the next. Yes. You know, how do you, like a really good example is the very last 2 lines of the whole thing, where you go from, you know, connecting that idea to this. And you know, if they're able to kind of go there, then it's like really the last note of the old idea into the first note of the new idea. Right. Like, how do you turn that? How do you know, what do you do with the vibrato? What do you do with the bow speed? How do you mentally get the audience to like go with your story, to take it to the next place? that,
Sure.
you know, when, like I said, that's the kind of student you love having, because
Right.
they're able to go to that place. But that, like I said, I mean, if you have any other thoughts of your own, I love to hear them, because, you know, I always learn stuff from other people that are trying to teach the same music.
I know. Yeah. Well, I probably would do the same thing. You know, to be honest, a little bit too late to start this piece because the audition pretty soon. It should be done earlier.
Yeah.
I just got one of the private students who wants to do it. I don't know if it's, well, we're gonna try it. I mean,
Yeah.
again, depends how much time you're gonna offer, you know, for
Yeah.
this. Yeah, the kids,
Sure.
unfortunately, they're so busy with so many different stuff, but you know, it's always a chance. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's good to do. I mean, I've even had some students do them and get a terrible grade, and it's actually motivated them to do really
Yes. Yeah.
realize they have to put more into it the next year.
Yes. Yeah.
So you never quite know, you know, but no,
Yeah.
I think it's really good. It's great for them to have a goal.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Definitely gonna make them better musicians. So
Yeah.
I always telling them, of course, the result is good, but for me as a teacher is most important the process to get there.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I think too. So like,
Yeah.
that's for like I said, with some of these fingerings, you know, they're up on the D string or up on the A string, and I think they're great. I think they actually work really well with the piece, but
Yeah.
I could, you know, I have some students that they're just not going to get there. So then it's just a
Yeah.
question of, all right,
Yeah.
so do you just cross over to the E string, you know what I mean, and just do
Yeah.
that, or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, that's sometimes that I think is just what has to happen.
Mhm. And again, fingering could be adjusted, you know, per student if
Totally. Yeah.
they have difficulties to climb up there. Maybe, you know, it's okay to use. I mean, it's not preferred, but you know, it's always you have to watch individually what's working.
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through the Haydn?
Sure, I will listen. Yep.
Yeah. So the Haydn,
It's very little. It's just like I'm making them to work on the whole piece because it's for me to play just too little excerpts from that. You know, it feels like they're not going to even get what they need. But
yeah, no, I agree. I totally
Yeah.
agree. So I actually had I teach at Rowan University, and I
Mhm.
don't really have any high school students at this point, but the last time this was in the cycle, I
Right.
did have a high school student who was doing it. And you know, she was okay, but she was
Yeah.
not great. So I very much have in my mind sort of all the things that frustrated her.
Right.
You know, and probably the first thing I remember, actually looking at like the second excerpt first, but I think it might be first on the sheet, is like the tone on. So I just remember always she would play that and it would kind of crunch and she'd, you know, be like, ugh. And that it is, if you don't have real bow control, that is going to not sound good. You know, it really is tricky getting the left hand to get out of the way for that third.
They have intense take bow off the string, and I'm trying to tell them, no, it's not. You have to keep your bow on the string. Da 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 da. Yeah, that part, yes. The last
Yeah.
one, but 16 note, but da da.
Oh, this one, yeah. Yeah, that one I don't think.
Everything should be on the string.
Yeah,
So.
no, I agree. One thing I've really learned with these double stops is making sure they release, like especially this one.
Right.
So it's so funny. One year I did something on the Brook, and I talked about this, and there was a violin teacher. She was actually in the Metropolitan Opera, and at first she was like, I totally disagree with that. But then when we were talking, she understood more what I was saying. So I have something I tend to teach, and I call it a coffee break. So basically what it is, when you're trying to sustain a note with like a full tone, but it's maybe not like it's an awkward note, like you know this. that somewhat awkward note. I find that what usually the reason it crunches because they're trying to hold the same weight throughout the entire thing. So one of the things that I have them do is I have them play like just half a bow and then try to release, like not leave the string, but just release gently halfway through. And then once they have that, go back and then gradually like do that less and less until you're just feeling it. And this is, I think the reason that person was so upset is because she was equating that to like, which is not at all what I was saying. It's more like within one note. So like if I don't do that, it just goes through. But if I have a little release and then come back like that, then it makes it way more ringing. And so that's something that I find particularly on that third is tricky. The other thing that I think is a little tricky on this is the intonation, because you kind of have to tune the C to the open C string to the open E string, which makes it really high. So you feel like you're starting very high. And so that's way too high for that. But if you go down there, it's going to be too low for that. So again, depends on the level of the student. But
Yeah.
you know, if they're able to kind of go there, you know, I normally just say you always tune to the perfect interval. But in this case, you actually have this with the E, so you kind of have to tune it up there. This is one I tend to, depending on the size of the student's hand, this is the big one of either you do it shifting or stretching. But this is also a place where like that little coffee break, that little release helps these long notes. So like if I'm really analyzing what I'm doing with the bow, I'm releasing, going back in, having a little more weight here.
Yeah. I also let them to learn just shifting da da without trills, and then adding the trills later, so they can.
Yes.
And it's working really well. That.
Yeah. A lot of students also, they get so tied up with the trill, and they also like they forget, they just lose everything. They can lose the beat. They can lose where their hand is. Yeah. No, it's very, very easy to kind of lose all that. I think the double stops do a little bit of left hand, like coordinating that can be a little bit tricky, you know.
Yes.
How to do that, and again, depending on the size of the hand, but even if you have a big hand, I think like having a little rotation really does help. So like one thing I might have them do is just tap like the first finger of the G string and then the E string, and like really have them exaggerate that, just to kind of get that feeling of rotation. So that when they are going for this, that they have enough room. And I'm sure, you know, we've all seen students that have their wrists out like this or in or whatever, and that's often causes issues with something like
Yeah.
that. I think the only other thing I would say with this is getting that really clean. If I just like a little push in each up bow. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that passage?
Well, this one, I'm teaching without lower G, just da 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 da, so they can start hitting, intonation correctly. Then learning crossing, pam 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 pam, but separately.
Yeah.
And again, depends on the student. Someone's learning quickly, someone's having difficulties, because it's,
right.
But,
how many students do you have?
Oh, well, I'm teaching for a long time. So, yes.
Yeah.
I have, well, right now I'm preparing about 3 students, for regions. Last year, all my 3 students made it, so that's good. So,
good.
Yeah, so hopefully this year would be same thing.
Yeah.
We'll see.
They're doing it in person, right?
Yeah. What?
It's in person this year?
It's in person, yes.
Good.
Yes, I start doing in person, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
But you know what? I feel even with working with a good student on video calls, it's still working.
Yeah.
But the good student, who really wants to do it, who listens, it really, not a big difference, if they're, so I still teach, I am from Russia, so I still teach kids from there.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And even without, pandemic, I still, was doing this, and it's working really well, for students who wants to do it.
Sure. No, absolutely.
For some students, you need to show physically, you need to show that it's different. But if the student knows what to do, so it works pretty well. Yeah.
Especially if you've been with them already, then I felt like it wasn't that bad. If you're just starting out online, it could be a little.
Oh yes, that's different. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the first section, so. So like one thing I find a little the starting up bow, I think is great, but it just again requires like a little more weight.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, great. So, well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, sorry, my video was off, so I just want to say hi.
Hi, yes. So,
nice to meet you.
Yes, very nice to meet you. Yes, I'm always, I'm going to be, I'm actually